Welcome everybody to the online launch of the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. My name is Claire Warmby and I'm the Programme Director based at the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute. I'm joined today by Oren Shallett of Climate View and also Judy Kilgallen, who's our Capacity Building Manager at the Improvement Service. So just some quick housekeeping. We will be giving you 3 short presentations today and then doing a Q&A. So if you'd like to submit questions to the speakers using the Q&A button, and we will try and answer as many of these as possible at the end. So what we're going to go through today, we're going to do the origins of the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service and to talk about really what the problem is and our work to date and explain how we've set the service up. I'm going to then pass over to Oren to give an introduction to the Climate View methodology, an approach that they've used in a number of municipalities across the globe. And then Judy is going to explain how the SCIS is going to be delivered, how it's going to help local authorities and their partners, what our vision is for the future and what our next steps are. We'll then open everything up to the Q&A and, as I said, try and get through as many as possible. So I'm going to start talking a bit about the problem. This graph shows the UK local authority greenhouse gas emission statistics measured in kilotons of CO2 equivalent, which are produced annually by DESNZ. So what this shows is that Scotland really currently has around about a 39 million tonne CO2 equivalent problem, emissions problem, which is split out across the 32 local authority areas. What we're really talking about here is what's called the area-wide problem. So it's not one that's owned by a single organisation, but instead has multiple problem owners. So the combination and size of emission sources varies between local authorities, but really most of the emissions that are covered by the Scottish climate change targets are included within this problem set. We have made progress in the last 17 years, but the most progress we've made is around the grid emission factor. So that has been reducing pretty steadily since 2013 due to an increase in renewables in the grid and a decrease in the amount of coal-fired generation. What we now have to do is to solve the slightly trickier problem of heat in buildings, transport and agriculture. And these are trickier because of various reasons, which include the existing embedded infrastructure that we've got, a much bigger set of decision makers in the mix, and some really misaligned incentives. These are also far more personal problems. So they intersect with how we travel, how we heat our homes, what we eat, where we work, how we play. But we also need to reframe this because this isn't necessarily just a climate problem. Instead, what we should think about is that this is a set of solutions to some of our most tricky societal problems around health and well-being, access to services, child and fuel poverty, sustainable economic development, with emissions reductions really coming in as a co-benefit. So as an example of this, for example, using increasing opportunities for active travel, this has a strongly evidenced impact on health, air quality and access to services. And therefore, improving this helps solve some of those really tricky problems. So we have spent a long time thinking about and setting and resetting our emissions targets and how we measure and report these. But the problem with long-term targets is we sometimes spend more time focusing on the end game, which is how we reduce the last 5%, than on the actual problem in front of us, which is how to get the next 5 to 10% of emissions reductions locked in, whilst thinking about also how to enable low carbon future choices. So this decision making is really kind of a combination of direct reductions, so things like retrofitting existing buildings, some indirect interventions, thinking about things like putting in vehicle charging infrastructure, and enabling actions such as tightening up building regulations and planning policy so we don't build our future problems. We can't manage the problem everywhere all at once, and we don't need to. So we need to start focusing efforts and prioritising actions where we have stronger levers, and trust that we'll be able to get better at managing the problem over time, and therefore we'll be able to start dealing with the lower influence emissions in the future. This diagram shows a representation of a Scottish local authority area-wide emission sources and the degree of control and influence that local authorities have over these. So in the organisational climate action pot, these plans deal with emissions in direct and indirect control of the organisation, but these probably only make up about 3 to 5% of the area-wide footprint. Therefore, we need to also start thinking about how we design interventions to deal with the high, medium influence emission sources. And some of these are very large. For example, road transport and private housing and commercial industrial development. Some of these are much smaller, so for example, publicly owned and managed green spaces. So we need to start making sensible decisions about how much time and energy and money we invest in these areas. The way that we're doing this at the moment, and I did promise I'd try and be diplomatic about this, but I ended up just calling it death by PDF. We are currently developing strategies and route maps at all levels of government and in the private sector. In the Scottish Government public sector alone, we have found over 300 climate-related plans. And these represent a huge collective effort to understand and manage many different aspects of climate change. But we often find that this form of plans is hampering delivery. So it's very hard to keep track of all of the actions that are in there. When external factors change, the plans are not adaptable. And although the outcomes are often expressed as targets or more quantitatively, we're often short on the detail of the transitions that are required to deliver these outcomes. Therefore, when we're asking questions of these plans, which often happens at a local authority level, about what does this intervention save us in terms of CO2 equivalent, are we going to reach our target with this plan, and how much is the plan going to cost and how much emissions and money will it save, we're finding it quite difficult to answer these questions. And we're also finding this difficult to answer at a national level, where we've got the Scottish Climate Change Plan, which also struggles with the same sort of issues. So in summary, the problem we think is that area-wide emissions are not just large organisational footprints. We can't treat them like that. They are much more influenced and very little direct control. There are multiple problem owners and multiple stakeholders at very, very different levels and sizes of influence. But there's also multiple co-benefits that come alongside the delivery of transformation. And we're understanding that we need to make progress and evidence that progress, and we need to pick up the directions, pace and scale, but this is a very fuzzy data set. It takes 2 years for the area-wide data set to appear. Because it's so large, it takes a long time for small interventions and collective action to appear in the footprint. So we have kind of taken this problem and thought about what is our philosophy for delivering change. So our key philosophy can really be boiled down to thinking that climate change is not actually a data problem. We have so much data, it's coming out of our ears half the time. What we've got instead is a problem that's related to decision making, financing, politics, and emotions. And therefore, what we need to do is to address this problem in a different way. So we're planning to have the consistency of a common platform. We need everybody in Scotland at the local authority level to be using the same language, the same data set, and the same platform for planning their climate action, because that enables us to support people more effectively and to share practice between different areas. However, platforms are difficult to implement. This requires a huge amount of change in an already very, very overloaded system, and therefore we need to deliver the support to effectively use this platform. We want to move to live action plans which emphasise progress over perfection, so not trying to get everybody agreeing at an 80-page PDF, but just going, what happens if we look at it in this way? What happens if we model it like this? Having said this, it's not possible to sweep away all of the plans that are there. They're very important, they're functional in many times, and often they're mandatory. And therefore, what we want to do is create a system that runs alongside these and essentially takes the interventions out of those plans and puts them onto a common platform. So really sort of going, you can keep a strategy in PDF, but we need to just make sure that you can actually track your actions. And then we need to start talking about how to make climate action the solution, not the problem in this space. So really starting to evidence the co-benefits that come alongside transformation of transport, heat, and agriculture. So where did this idea for a service come from? Well, we started right back in 2019 with some funding from the UK, from the European Union, which was supporting the City of Edinburgh Council with funding to look at their climate strategy. We then got some more funding from the Scottish Government to explore using a tool that we developed. So we developed this kind of a very rough and ready Excel calculator to try and help the council answer some of these questions about whether they had enough interventions to meet a target. And we explored the option of whether we should use that with other cities or whether there are actually other options available. The problems and solutions that we identified were really not city specific, but applied to all local authorities. And we also found that there are an awful lot of other solutions out there that people are using, and there's no point in kind of building a new spec solution when we can just buy the best in the market. So we decided to ask for funding for a Scotland-wide programme for all local authorities to support them in this journey. We then got support from all of our partners, and we put together a proposal for a 3-year programme, which is jointly funded by all 32 local authorities and the Scottish Government. And this gives us all skin in the game. The Improvement Service, the University of Edinburgh and the Sustainable Scotland Network have all been involved in the setup, and SSN has been extremely supportive in enabling us to engage with local authorities through their forum. Since 2023, sorry, we've used this development funding to engage all of the local authorities in the design of this service and the platform requirements. And then we did a public procurement exercise and contracted Climate View as our platform provider. And Oren's going to talk you through what that platform looks like. We set up a user group with all the local authorities to inform the inventory and design the service and provide support and impact feedback. And we are now here in the launching of the journey. We've actually already started our user journey with local authorities and started doing the training. We've also had an extraordinary level of support from all our partner organisations at a time when everyone is hugely stretched and under pressure. And we really hope that SCIS pays back that faith and delivers a step change in how we coordinate climate action. So I'm now going to hand you over to Oren Shalit, who's here from Climate View, and he's going to talk about their approach and experience of supporting municipalities across the world.
Thank you, Claire. So hi everyone, I'm Oren, I'm from Climate View, and I will, as Claire said, take you through a few slides and show you actually the platform. But I'll start off with actually the thinking behind it. So let's go to there and I'll share my screen. And please tell me if it doesn't work. Do you see my screen, Claire?
Yep.
Great. So very shortly about Climate View. Climate View started in 2018 because of our anxiety for what's happening in the world when it comes to climate. We approached Sweden as a country. We were maybe lucky, but we actually very quickly managed to get a project up and running, which is today Sweden's project that is now being launched all across the world. So Sweden was our first customer, another 2 cities in 2019 in Sweden. And then we, during 2020, found another 5 cities in Sweden, 5 cities in Britain, and 5 cities in Germany. From there, we started working from cities to others, all sorts of different local authorities, around with rural, working with all 53, meaning that, of course, you have everything from very rural local authorities to very big cities. In the US, we first approached them in 2023, but actually things are continuing. They're very fast. But one of the things that is happening at the same time in Europe is a standardization process. First, a DIN process in Germany that will go over to European standard and then probably a global ISO standard. We're also having a big pilot with the Ministry of Netherlands with both local authorities of all sizes. And this week we announced together with ECLAY, I'm missing an L there, I see, which is the biggest NGO in the world around climate. And there we're going to work with their members, and that's well above 400 cities that will be starting to use our platform. So, and maybe the most and the only country in the world that is really working all across the country is Scotland. And we're extremely proud of that, because now the way that the whole project is financed, as Claire said, with all those municipalities together, with the government itself, and all working together in parallel, that is amazing, and no one else has done it in the world before. One other big thing that we're trying to do is not just a platform, it's actually to create a framework, a standard that is global. And we are now investing and have invested lots of time in what we call the Open Transition Indicators, an open source project where we are connecting IPCC mitigation methods to the framework developed by 3 governmental agencies in Sweden together with us, and then city and local authority after local authority. And those are going to be launched. We've started launching it carefully, whispering here and there, but in COP28, so in a month or so, it will be launched properly with looking at all the IPCC emission overviews, looking at all the IPCC publication, giving index to all of them, and really going all the way down to the YAML specification, the YAML code. And that will be quite a foundation, we hope, for the world that will help all of us to work towards getting towards climate neutrality in a much faster way. Because in the end of the day, we all want a better place. We want to go from where we are now to a place that is better in all different aspects, not just because we have less emissions. And if we're going to do it, we need change. And changing means we have to heat our homes in a different way. We have to change the way we travel, how we produce energy, how we manage waste, how we produce food. And all those changes need, of course, plans. So we start creating plans. And the transport team creates a mobility plan. The housing team creates a retrofitting plan. And the energy team, energy plan. The waste team, waste plan. And we have also all the local authority plans, like the city plans, where you create the area by area, the detailed development plans. And we have the big long-term plans of the comprehensive local authority plans. We have also the private sector. They have many of them have plans, not all, but they are all looking different, of course. And we're creating those plans, which means we need data, lots of data for each one of those plans, like a mobility plan, there are loads and loads of data points. So data points all over the place, which are the plans. Now, there is also a new team on the block, much newer than the other teams, and that's a climate team. And the climate team is, of course, producing a plan of how to get to net zero. And there you need loads and loads of data points. But the data isn't connected, because if you look at how all those different data are looking like, they're actually done by different people, different teams, and they're not very well connected. Therefore, the plans are not connected either. So I'll give you an example. If we look at a mobility plan, one figure that should be there is the number of electric cars per year. That is the growth of electric cars. Of course, the number of cyclists, number of people working home, and all the different options we have. So that number is there. And in the retrofitting plan, you will have the number of houses or square meters that retrofitted each year. And you will also have another option, the number of heat pumps that will be installed each year. And in the energy plan, it's all about how we'll produce clean electricity, but also, of course, how we will consume and how much we will consume. Now, the number of electric cars, that goes to the climate plan, and the number of houses, that's part of the climate plan, and the number of heat pumps, that's part of the climate plan, and of course, how we'll produce clean and green electricity. But the number of heat pumps, that's also part of the energy plan, because then we'll need more electricity. And if we retrofit more houses, we'll need actually less electricity, at least for heat pumps, and a total amount of, less energy. And the mobility plans and the number of electric cars, that has to go into the energy plan, because we will have to know how many cars we're going to charge. So the energy plan is very tightly tied to the climate plan. It's the foundation of a climate plan. So all this data is all connected. And today, we don't have a good way to connect them. And the people are not connected, because behind each one of those plans, we have different teams. And some of the stakeholders are external, outside of the local authority. some are maternal, but there are loads and loads of people working with this. So this means we have an issue here, and let's understand the issue. Well, you can look at it like this. When it comes to people, we have very divergent KPIs for the different teams, what's actually measured. We have a divergent standards. We have very different processes and very different IT systems. When it comes to data, there's no existing common standard. There's only different standards for the traffic and maybe for housing, but not one that is a common standard. So we don't have a common language. And another problem is that the plans, as Claire put it, are very static. Here, maybe this is a bit tough to say, but sometimes they look like 5-year Soviet plans that don't actually change. And then you get COVID and you get the energy crisis. And you have to have, of course, ability to change and redo again and again until we reach our target. So all of the above means that there's little learning between cities and countries. There's lacking yearly transition targets, because actually, if you examine most of the climate plans in the world, they're more like climate visions instead of climate plans, because the word plan implies that we are here now. We want to go to another future, and then we have to have a plan of what we do first, second, and third. That is specific KPIs for what has to be done 2024, 5, 6, 7, etc. And most plans in the world lack it. So we have to connect people and data, and we have to do it in a way where the data is open source and is owned and governed by the local authority. The data has to be connected and it has to be modeled. So we need a method that is science-based, transparent, and standardized. We have to manage complex interactions and calculations. And more than that, we have to understand them so they're visualized in a way that's actionable and doable to connect actually the people that have to work with this. And this is what Climate View is about. So let's dive now into the platforms to start with. So we'll go now. What you see here, I'll just move this window. What you see here is Sweden's homepage, so to say, with the Swedish Climate Policy Council. Here you'll see another example from Dundee. This is Dundee, Sustainable Dundee, which have done a beautiful landing page for their climate work. And in both of those, you can explore the mission dashboard. So here is Sweden's dashboard, and here's Dundee's dashboard. So you'll recognize that there are similar. Of course, there are many differences. And of course, here we have lots and lots of government people working with all the 248 policies that you will see that Sweden has, and a lot of governmental authorities every week working and changing it. And what's interesting, actually, this board is changed in sprints that are bi-weekly. So every second week, you will see changes in this board. So really working all the time in a way that means that we have to change our data points, our strategies, and of course, our interventions. So what you see here are the different sizes of emissions in Sweden or in Dundee, and you'll see the plan to get things down. But let's look at a quick introduction because it gives us the logic of everything. So Dundee's pathway to net zero, how do we get there? Well, the big question is, how do we get there and still fulfill Dundee's citizens' need of eating well, getting to work, heating and cooling our homes, etc.? Now, the problem is, if we're getting more and more people in Dundee, we'll also get more and more emissions from fossil fuel cars if we still, with every new person, get another car, another part of a car, so to say, which means that we need change. And of course, those changes are known to you. Here are 3 options: walking and cycling, electric cars, public transport. The thing is, those options are the same options all over the world. It's nearly like a menu. So it doesn't matter if it's Dundee or Shanghai, these are the options that are known to humankind 2024. Here you'll see all the different options for mobility. Here you will see the options for producing cement and concrete, for agriculture, for producing energy. And this option will include, of course, walking and cycling, and another one is train. So that's it. Those are the options we can choose between, meaning that from here, if we have decided that we want more people on their bikes in Dundee, and that's part of the plan, which it is in Dundee, that means we have to have a KPI, a target, a yearly target. So we understand how many people do we have to get on their bikes 2024, 25, 26, etc. And then connect all the different actions that are connected to biking. And then you get one big plan that connects everything. And that can be for a small local authority, a big city, or a whole country like here. And here you'll see, if we dive into transport, you will see how the private transport, and let's look at cycling, you'll see two things. You will see here in this graph, you will see how this is Sweden's scenario of the number of people that will be on their bikes, the share of walking and cycling in percent. We have a number, a yearly target. And here the white line is historical data, which of course the peak here is COVID. And in the same way, if we zoom out and now instead look at public transport and buses, we'll see that COVID had the same effect here. And also when we're down to each one of those, we'll see that underneath here, now we have zoomed into the specific actions that affect the transition biking. So this one, that is bike streets, only affects increased proportion of walking and cycling. Each one of those is called transition element in our language. And in IPCC language, it's mitigation options. While this action is much wider, it's carbon tax, so you'll see it affects many transitions. So it doesn't matter if you're a local authority or if a city, you can understand what are we doing and what is our plan, our specific plan for this example, bikes. And in this case, you see both the number of increasing people that are now on their bikes and the effect it has on the emissions over here. So again, the effect of the emissions is just, it's not the cause, it's the effect. So the KPI, the hard KPI we have to measure is the cause. And in this case, the cause is diesel and petrol cars, and a solution is shifting over to bikes. Okay, so what we've seen here is the public-facing board. You're welcome to, of course, explore them yourself, Sweden's and D's, Bristol's and others. But you can also, and let's do that, go behind the scenes. So I'll take you now behind the scenes and look at part of the working tool that the Scottish local authorities will be working with. So what we have here is the so-called balancing tool, where you'll find all the sectors that a local authority can work with. One of them is private transport, another is freight, building with cement and concrete, electricity and district heating, local heating for non-residential. So each one of those sectors is here. And here you form the pathway, the strategy to net zero in this case. So what it shows here is that all the kilometers, miles driven 2045, which is in this city, the targets, you'll see that all the miles are still driven in diesel and petrol kilometers. So by pulling up the lever here, and I'll pull it up to max with electric cars, what we're doing is we're shifting by 2045 all the diesel and petrol cars to electric cars. And here you saw the consequences when it comes to the remaining emissions. You'll still see that there are emissions left 2045, and those are emissions that you will find up here, and that's from the production of electricity, which means that UK will have this size of box, while you will find in Sweden and even more so in Norway, this gray box will be smaller, while it will be bigger in Poland, depending on how green the grid is. And of course, in the model, you can both model the grid as well as combine it with your own electricity. Anyway, this is electric cars, but we don't want Dundee doesn't want everyone on electric cars and just have more and more cars in the city. So let's pull this down and pull up some more people on their bikes and some more people on the bus. And we do believe that e-meetings and remote working will continue, as well as passenger rail will also continue to grow. And then we've created a scenario. So like this, we can sit together, different stakeholders, and discuss, argue, do different scenarios, and then take decisions. Because these are difficult decisions, because look at the consequences. When we say the changes here, and now look at the consequences, it becomes very obvious that in this city, when we go into biking, we now have a backcasting of the number of commutes. So this is a number of people that have to get on their bikes by 2025. So we have a number, and we can look at tables giving us, so the number for 2025 is this number of kilometers that have to be shifted over from kilometers in diesel and petrol cars to bikes. So you have all sorts of numbers, so you can get a good grip and understanding of how this actually looks like. Meaning that when you're here, you may argue for it should be higher or it should be lower. But this way you can iterate back and forward between each one of the shifts, options, transition elements. I'm using 3 different words for the same thing here, and understand how we are going to get to a target. You can also see the economic consequences. So here we see the consequences for walking and cycling, and amongst other, the incredible health benefits that are behind it. And the last part I will show you is the energy model, because now we've just been talking about the consumption of energy. And when we have this many electric cars, this means we're going to consume more and more electricity. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if we, let's say, changes, if we go into the energy model, we now can do this, get the same understanding of how are we going to get to the required 1.21 terawatt hours. So in this way, I can model how much are we going to take from the grid and how much can we build solar rooftops or wind offshore, hydrogen-fired power plants, and model our transition from our production side. And in that sense, what we're doing now, when we are working this way, is doing exactly this. Connecting all those numbers in one place, enabling us to get a common language by having the right data in place, modeling the right data in place, visualizing it in the right way, and enabling people to take those incredible tough decisions that we have in front of us. I think that's it. And of course, you can ask questions when we come to the Q&A.
Thank you very much for that, Oren. I'm now going to hand over to Judy Kilgallen, and she will talk about how we're delivering this.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Claire and Oren. And what I'd like to really just touch on now is how the service is being delivered, how it will help local authorities and also wider partners, stakeholders and communities. So firstly, how is the service going to be delivered? It's all about national coordination with local support and implementation. As is hopefully becoming clear, that the service is being delivered by a partnership between the Improvement Service, Edinburgh Climate Change Institute, bringing together that climate change expertise and the local government support experience and skills. It's a partnership also with all 32 local authorities themselves and Scottish Government, who are jointly funding the project, and it's clearly as well a close collaboration with Climate View. So working across all the local authorities in their areas, we have 2 main objectives: to both support local authorities to effectively use the Climate View platform to collate, scale up, coordinate and monitor climate action, and also to support decision makers to understand the implications of the data. And both of these will be through training, data and knowledge sharing. So we've put local authorities into 3 families that will be supported through our local lead team to support that platform use and build capacity. And then there's also going to be the cross-cutting themes and areas that we will draw out for support across those families. There's a central data team who will support the area-based inventory and help develop consistent methodologies and approaches. And most importantly, we'll continue to work in partnership with the existing ecosystem that's already supporting climate action. As we've said, this is definitely not about starting from scratch. I would highlight the importance of the Sustainable Scotland Network, been fundamental in getting this programme up and running and continuing to help shape it. We're already speaking with other national support organisations and regional structures to explore and understand how we fit in and support existing work. So in practice, I'd like to touch on the user journey. So this is really the capacity building programme that we've designed in partnership with local authorities and with Climate View. And co-design has said a lot, but it's really been at the heart of the whole service. We have an ongoing feedback and review that we undertake. As well as training, we're going to be offering drop-ins and direct support, and we'll use that feedback to develop and improve this journey as we go. Probably goes without saying, but it will take some time for local authorities to learn how to use the functionality, map out plans and strategies, and start understanding how to fill in the gaps. But we'll all be on that journey together. So firstly, we'll have getting started sessions as very much an introduction to the methodology and the platform and the framework and what's to come. So be followed by work and a focus on the data and the inventory about our approach and how we're linking that to existing work that's taken place. Be a big emphasis, as has been mentioned, on how to tailor these different transition elements in the platform to what's relevant for each local area. There'll be a big bit of work around understanding the different interventions. So these are the existing commitments to act and the new ones that are coming through and how we enter them into the platform. As we start to reach early next year, then we'll be looking at how to publish and support engagement and communications around publishing the dashboard. I think it's really important to recognise this will be an iterative and continuous process about the data that's being entered and how that data is being used. It's not going to be a tick that's done and then move on. So there will be a lot of work around how we understand those interventions and inputting them and then sharing them publicly as well. And as we move on into early next year, then we'll be getting into the balancing targets and the different scenario pathways that Oren started to talk about there. So really, yeah, a combination of training and drop-ins and one-to-ones, along with different resources that are being created. We're very aware that local authorities and their areas and partners will move at different paces and speeds, and so we'll be working with them to understand what is needed and when. So how will the SCIS help in the long term? So similar to it will take time to get up and running, it will also take time for all the benefits to materialise. It's a fundamental change in the way that we deliver climate action, but we have had great engagement from local authorities in developing the service so far, and we've also had huge support and engagement from the Scottish Government Net Zero public sector team. So firstly, for leaders and elected members, this is all about more informed decision making. It's about clearer and more current information about the various plans and ambitions at local level. It's about a common platform, language and data to support that consistency and support that national conversation about doing this once for Scotland, not 32 different ways by each local authority. It's about creating a live plan, something that's not buried in the many different documents there are. It's something that can be updated, it can be shared, it can be understood, and ultimately that all stakeholders, including the public, can see and engage with the local area plan. Our vision going forward is the creation of a truly local area climate action plan where we can map the interventions of multiple stakeholders and can have the open conversations about the transitions that are needed in how we live, work, eat, travel to deliver climate action. And of course, all the cool benefits of climate action. This is not just about climate intelligence, there's the wider reach and impact on health, inequality and resilience that we're already exploring how we can embed that. So what is next? We thought it would be helpful before we come to you all for questions. So please do start thinking about them and popping them in the Q&A box. But to touch on what we'll be focusing on in the near term, just to sort of share that. So the main focus clearly will be around the capacity building programme, this user journey for local authority officers, alongside attending regional and national events as we're guided by the local authority officers we're working with and Scottish Government. We are looking at how we reach beyond the climate change teams to others within councils and the wider area. And really from early next year, we'll be looking more closely at the wider stakeholders. And I'd flag that the different events and sessions that we're doing that are open to everyone will be publicised on our LinkedIn page, and you can sign up on our website to be kept informed. We're very aware that we need area-based working and collaboration for the service to be a success, and more importantly, to deliver action effectively. So I'll stop there and hand back to Claire, and we've got time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both Judy and Aaron, for those presentations. I'm really hoping that there are some questions somewhere. I can't see any in the Q&A. And so I'm hoping that people are going to start asking some questions. But I'm going to kick off with a question for Aaron, which is about, you've obviously worked with quite a lot of municipalities and regions around the world. Can you tell us which one has been, in your eyes, the most successful, and what kind of factors has led it to be successful? Sorry, Aaron, you're on mute.
Now that was very stupid of me. Yeah, thanks. So I was saying, when I was on mute, that it is all about people. So the biggest factor in the end are the people, the team that are working together. And where we see the biggest success is where people in the local authority are managed to work cross-functionally, where it's not just an isolated climate team, but it is a team that is working together and manages to pull in all the other teams. Because each one of the teams, of course, have to continue working in their silos with their expertise, if it's waste or traffic. But the thing with the climate plan is that it's truly cross-functional. And therefore, the only way to really push things forward is if you get all those teams together. And that can be about the people themselves, but of course also the organization and setting up in the right way. And I'll give you an example. Tomorrow I'm having a kickoff with a local authority in Sweden. They're just 17,000 inhabitants, so it's nothing huge, pretty small all in all. And this local authority has invited now all their managers, from all middle managers and all top managers, to really understand what this is all about and how we have to work together to those common KPIs.
Thank you for that, Aaron. Okay, I'm going to come to a question from Alistair Brown, and I'm going to ask Judy. Alistair's asked, who are the main users going to be in the platform in each local authority generally, and will the tool be widely communicated to staff across each local authority?
Thanks, Claire. Yes, I'd spotted that one, and great question, Alistair. It's something that we have been discussing with local authorities quite in depth already. So in general, then clearly there will be a range of different sort of roles that will be engaging with the platform, the people who are sort of maybe more day to day, and then there'll be those who are more interested in the sort of the implications and what the data and intelligence is showing them. Something that when we've worked with Climate View before, and I think as the improvement service and ECCI, we're all very much aligned in how this doesn't just stay with the climate change team. Having said that, clearly there will be elements of it that, depending on the size of the team that's involved in it, but something we're keen, and as we're delivering this training moving forward, we are open to taking the local authorities' lead on who they want to come to the training. As we all know, that will vary depending on the capacity and particularly the size of the different local authorities, but we're trying to be as open as we can in having that space where who has the time and capacity to come along and do that. I think I would flag that the particular sort of teams around transport, around property and heat and buildings, around planning, there's a few that will sort of naturally maybe be more interested sooner rather than later, and that's something that we'll be supporting nationally as much as we can in those sort of through the local lead team and and supporting that, as you say there, for it to be communicated to staff across each local authority, because that's really how this will work. And I'm you know, Oren will speak from experience in sort of, you know, how we get different, you need to have these different officers and different teams brought in early on, the different people and data coming together as early as we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Right, there's been a question by Rachel who's asked, will local authorities be apportioned legal CO2 targets that will be connected to the Scottish Government's 5-year budgets? This will help align financial budgets. I'm going to take that question. It's surprisingly difficult to apportion emissions equitably and fairly in envelopes because of the different ways that local authority, or the different areas that local authorities have control over in terms of like the emissions pot. So for example, a local authority that has a large amount of agricultural emissions essentially has a kind of like lagged problem compared with city local authorities which have a large amount of heat and transport, in terms of how we think this transformation will happen. We are always open to working with what people feel would be most useful in terms of setting targets, but our current approach is that we have a target in Scotland, it's 2045 for net zero, and what we actually need to do is work out how to deliver that at pace and scale. So in a way, we're kind of trying to avoid the resetting targets again and adding more targets into the system. What we think we need to do is work out how much are we delivering, how fast, and what does that look like across Scotland, and how can we make it work better. So we're open to these discussions, but I think at the moment it's let's work out how to move our first pawn in this chess game. In terms of your second part of your question, you've also asked about how Scottish Government policy implementation works with local authority policies. Again, this is an area that we have really started looking at, is kind of like how does Scottish Government policies tie to the transition elements that Oren talked about in the platform, and then how do they get delivered at local levels, and what local policies are them. So we're really trying to start thinking about if we can pull out a national data set that shows us a little bit about which areas of climate change policy are really being delivered and that we've got evidence that we're moving on, and which bits are like at the moment not really in the picture. There might be a very good reason for that. It might be that the local government has relatively little control, but it allows us to start seeing that in really quite a visual way that should help us then feed into policy development at both national and local level. Right, I'm hoping some questions I can feed to someone else. Laura's asked about whether members of the public will be able to see the climate view data for all 32 local authorities and Scotland as a whole entity. So I'm going to pass this first to Oren to talk about how it works in Sweden, and then I'm going to pass it to Judy to talk about how we think we might publish, or how we might support people to publish this.
So Sweden isn't a good example, because although we started in Sweden and we're working on a governmental nation level, it's not been distributed down to all the local authorities. So therefore Scotland is so special. And I would like to, I don't know, Claire, if you want to speak about the aggregation of data and our thoughts behind that.
It's a work in progress.
So so anyway, the idea is the idea now is, it's not an idea, what's happening now is that each local authority are doing their own, let's call it boards, so their own climate plan. But of course, if they're all speaking the same language, all the different plans, it means you can aggregate data, and this will be done.
Thanks, Oren. Judy, do you have anything to talk about in terms of like the publication of dashboards?
Yeah, thank you, and good question, Laura. I think so I mentioned that we're looking or sort of working towards that being in January, February, depending on sort of where we get to and what local authorities are happy with and comfortable with. But I think the main point is really that there will be so there'll be 32 local area dashboards that will be accessible, and really, as we know, these things will only be as good as what goes into them. I think it's very important that we recognise, and I know this has come through in conversations with local authorities already, is that it needs to be an ongoing process so that we don't fall back into the PDFs and the sort of the static nature. We need to have this to be alive, as things can be, an iterative process, as sort of, so publishing maybe different strategies as they're inputted onto the platform, receiving that feedback from the public and how that goes. But really the hope is that this will be, it will demonstrate the challenge, but it will also give a sort of a format and a basis for more productive conversations. And we are on the point about looking at how that's aggregated to Scotland, but there'll definitely be something on for each local area that will be viewable. And there's different things you can do without getting too much into the details. So for local authorities perhaps listening on the call, there's kind of behind the scenes things that can be done, and then you choose what is made public and when. So there's a lot of ownership that there is there, which I think is important, given that some of this is about seeing what is on the books and what can be done about it. I saw also, Claire, I'm happy to come in on John's, another good question about further input from local authorities to develop the platform. I said a couple of times, I think we all did, around the importance of local authority engagement and co-design in this. As we're going through that, we're also very aware of the pressures on local authority officer time, and we've sort of tried to work around that and to use that time as effectively as we can when people have been involved in helping us shape it. So there will definitely be input through that process as we go through. We are trying not to do survey fatigue, but we're constantly asking for that feedback and review. All 32 local authorities are, as you put it, signed up. So through CAUSA, there is a commitment to multi-year funding, which I think shows the importance and the recognition of the scale of the challenge and the time it will take for that solution to come through. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, there's suddenly lots of questions. It's hard to keep track.
Thanks, Judy. A bit related to that, Drew has asked about how do we measure the success of the service. We've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, and one of the advantages of working across the Improvement Service and the Climate Change Institute as part of a university is that we're kind of quite keen on this part of it. So we have developed an outcome map of what we think are going to be the outcomes of this service if it's successful going forward. And then we're collecting, as we go, various kind of KPIs. So we start off by really kind of going, are we enabling people to engage in the service? Is the training working and building capacity? Are people using the platform? Are we starting to increase the number of interventions and model transitions? But going forward further, it will be starting to really think about, can we collect evidence that change is happening? Are people making different decisions because the platform is providing them with data that's enabling them to take those decisions? A lot of the things that we're going to have to do differently are really, really hard because they're politically difficult. They require huge amounts of societal change. And at the moment, it's really frightening for people to take those decisions. And we think that this platform, having this kind of common language and data set and evidence and approach, will actually help people understand why we need to do these things and why it's a good idea. And that's part of the success of the service, is seeing that change happening. Whether we can capture all of it is another matter, but we are at least starting to think about what would be the process for capturing that kind of evidence. Because as Judy said, this is a long-term problem, but we need to really show that this is working. If it's not working, we need to do something else, and we need to do it really quickly. So I think that's a really good question. I'm going to go up to the top and see what we've got there. Oh, okay. There is a question from Ross about how other municipalities have integrated evaluation of the cost of different options into their use on the platform, and has this been difficult? I think this would be a good one for Oren, because you've obviously got that view of lots of different municipalities and how they've started to look at kind of how do you evaluate the cost benefit of different approaches.
Yeah, and is that the question about the actions we take and the change we're doing? So really what we're relying when it comes to Climate View in our development is we're leaning on open data sources and open research. So when it comes to the health benefits of biking, the example I took, the best research that we've found is EU research looking at biking and long-term health consequences. So we are just looking for the best data available and connected to the source. Now, one of the things we're doing together, all of us, and big job that SCIS has done is to look exactly at those different data points. Not so much as the social economic benefits, but a lot of the other data points, and everything is there to be completely open to create playbooks, handbooks, whatever you want to call it, of where and how to identify the best data sources and how to deal with those data sources, both from a local, from a UK or a Scottish perspective, and some of it is, of course, international numbers.
Thanks, Oren. There's been a question, well, quite a few questions that are all really good, and we will try and come back to these and answer them where we can. Karen's asked whether the platform will be able to integrate building resilience into policies and actions eventually, as well as being focused on emissions reductions initially. So I think if I'm reading this right, it's kind of like, does the platform enable us to think about climate adaptation and potentially other resilience actions? There is a lot of interest in this. We know that a large chunk of the climate policies that we and plans that are available are to do with adaptation rather than mitigation. And we are thinking about how do we build this in so that at the very least we can capture interventions that are adaptation related rather than mitigation related in order to be able to keep everything into one place. Obviously, there's a difficulty in terms of like the modelling, because mitigation has the benefit that it has a kind of a natural common currency of tons of CO2 equivalent, which adaptation doesn't. But that doesn't mean that we can't capture adaptation actions and log them and be able to start again sharing best practice across local authorities, even if we can't quantify what reduction in risk we're seeing. I think we've run out of time for questions, unfortunately. There was a wealth of really good questions there. I'm really sorry if we didn't get to yours. Too many more questions than answers as normal. So I think we'll draw this to a close. I'm just going to share my screen again so that you can see our, hopefully, wait a minute, I need to get to the right slide. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go to the right slide. This is how you can contact us. So we are available to contact by an info@ address. We also have a website and a LinkedIn, and we would love you to follow us on LinkedIn and to contact us if you have specific questions, and also to have a look at our website. I would just like to close then by saying thank you very much to Oren and Judy for their participation. I'd also really like to thank the Scottish Government and the local authorities for all of the time and effort and support that has gone into delivering and setting up this service. And we're looking forward to working with all of you going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.